certainly dealt with those feelings of being judged, being maybe somewhat of an outcast, looked down upon, made mistakes in my life. All of those things I could relate to. When I learned specifically the mission of the public defender and represent those that otherwise would not have representation, that resonated with me.
You've been the president for JACL for over a year now, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So end of this year will finish my term, and it's a 2-year term, so I must have started in 2022.
Gotcha. So knowing that, JACL's whole mission is about civil rights and justice for everyone, I was curious, what drew you to doing this type of work and joining this type of organization? Was that something that's always been part of your nature, I guess?
I mean, it must be part of my nature because like it kind of dovetails into my everyday work, but I can honestly say so many of the things that I've been drawn to in my life have not been well planned or well thought out, like almost everything. And I mean, I must have good intuition because it turns out okay. But there's so many things that I do when you're like, was this like a specific goal or was this something you were aiming for? And I'm like, no, it just sounded like a good idea. And then I kind of just was around and I'm like, yeah, that seems like a good idea. And then I did it. But I mean, like I said, it's worked out. I seem to, at least in adulthood, have been drawn to like good things and good causes and good people. But so I wasn't necessarily specifically looking for JACL, but there's a couple of things that I think it fell into line that it made sense for me. And I
Hmm.
mean, I can go into it
Yeah.
now, but that's a long-winded answer. But that's also how I am.
No, this
All
is
my
about
answers.
you, so we want to hear
Oh,
you rather than me.
I know. Except all my imposter syndrome is like bells and whistles and screaming and telling me like, oh my gosh, you're gonna tell a story and then it's gonna be a fake story, but it's not. This is all real stories. It's just my own
which
psyche messing with me.
which is so interesting to me that you say that you have this imposter syndrome because I mean here you are
So
in this
bad.
position of leadership and you're in this profession where you have to kind of be on your A game and know what you're doing. I mean you went to school for so long to get that and when we were going to high school, I mean I didn't know you personally, but I always just looked up at you as like part of the cool kids, like the ones that were playing sports and that was doing, like so I always just thought you're part of that, the upper echelon of people. So to hear you say that you admittedly feel imposter syndrome is really surprising to me.
No, this is like I'm like convinced in maybe somewhere between the next 3 seconds and 40 minutes, all of I'm gonna get discovered as a fraud. Like you're gonna uncover to your audience any position or anything of worth I got was like, oh, it was a mistake. It was supposed to be given to the other Minda/Melinda. But anyways, putting that aside, no. So I mean, with respect to the JACL, I there's quite a few people that kind of grew up knowing what it was because their family or their parents or they were, especially on the continent, the West Coast, the
Hmm.
JACL was often a point of cultural connection too for the Japanese
Right.
community. I didn't have that, but what I did have was that my mom, who's from Los Angeles, that side of our family is from Los Angeles. I knew from a very young age, obviously, that our family was incarcerated during World War II. And so I
Oh,
had that, yeah. So I had that connection to the Japanese American story that is more prevalent, like in California and along the West Coast, than it is in Hawaii. So I mean, in 2000 and I think it was 18, it might have been 17. Our family, which included my mom, auntie, cousins, my husband was then my, I guess, boyfriend, because you did our wedding.
right, right.
So boyfriend at the time, two children, so like 19 and 14 ish. We went to Heart Mountain, Wyoming, which is the location where our family was incarcerated, and then where my mom was born in 1945. She was born right at the end of the war, but she was born while still
Oh
at
wow.
camp. So that
Wow.
kind of,
Holy
yeah,
smokes.
no, that experience was tremendous. And they do a pilgrimage that is put on by the Heart Mountain, some sort of preservation or conservation group. And they put it
Hmm.
on for, it's for community members, but obviously the vast majority of the folks that go to these events are connected usually pretty directly. And that experience was tremendous. I mean, it was truly monumental for me and of course my teenage children also. There were tears, there was learning, there was conversations that like a lot of Japanese families don't have. So that was kind of awakened or connected me to thinking about um, my Japanese American side, because you don't always think about it growing up in Hawaii, like specific,
Yeah.
specifically, right? Because they're kind of were everywhere. And then even more because my family is from Los Angeles, I didn't have a lot of the local Japanese culture. So I
Mm.
was, I hadn't really thought about it until that time. So then that became something that I really was interested in getting more involved in the Japanese American community. And that was one of the things that brought me to JACL.
Yeah, and you were talking about the experience and how impactful it was not only for you but for your family too. So what kind of things happened there? Like what were some things that stood out to you that really resonated with you? And had your mom been there since she was born?
No, no,
Oh
no. And I
wow.
mean, yeah, no, it's not like a annual thing. I mean, this is
Right.
for one, it's um, you know, we come from that culture where you kind of put aside the bad things that happen. You just carry on. You don't like to dwell on it. Yes, those were hardships. And something interesting that my mom had always told me, because, like I said, she was born in 1945. So she obviously doesn't remember the immediacy of the war and then even the
Right.
aftermath, returning back to Los Angeles with absolutely nothing and with in poverty, their home, their everything was taken. They faced tremendous amount of racism. She still claims she was very well protected because she was so young. So what she passed on to me was like it was very hard for maybe my mom and or my older sister, my brother, or other Japanese families. But I was very lucky that I was not impacted, which I kind of took at face value when I was younger. But I certainly
Hmm.
realize now that that is not how trauma and life experiences work. But that's very like Japanese way to package things. Like, oh yes, this bad
Yeah.
thing happened. Lucky for us, it didn't really affect us. And I was like, so no. I mean, for that reason, it's not something that we would. I think it was not like on her agenda. And I'm actually not
Hmm.
sure which family member decided to do the planning. I imagine it was her in part, but also it's I kind of like I'm not sure how many years the pilgrimage has been going on. So yeah, that was the first time we'd gone back, and certainly as a family, some of the things that were like really well done, and I should give a shout out to the Heart Mountain folks, is that they had recreated some of the barracks, and so you
Oh
got
wow.
to stand in the location and imagine. And whenever anything becomes
Oof.
history becomes tangible in that way, it gives you
Hmm.
like oh, all the feels and everything
Yeah.
happens. So you're just standing there and you're looking at how small these barracks are and imagining how cold it would get in the winters. I mean, we were there in the dead of summer, but still you can just imagine. So that was something they did really well. They had quite a few presentations, and I remember because again it had this like really tangible impact. They showed us some of the discriminatory, well, I should just say racist propaganda
Yeah.
that was being put out at the time. And there were signs in shopkeepers window that said Japs keep moving, and that was like so prevalent. And it's like feels like such a this must have been, I don't know, hundreds of years ago, but it wasn't. Like people that had been affected by that are still alive. Not many, because it's we're getting to be approximately one generation later, but there were still people directly impacted by that. So they did
Right.
those presentations, and then the third thing that was um, really special but I can tell you I don't remember the details because it was very emotional, and I just remember the
Mm.
feelings. They had what they called an intergenerational group session. So they made sure they had individuals that were there with different experiences, different generations, as the name implies, and they like forced us to share in ways that our culture often
Wow.
doesn't. And I honestly, my mom, when I talk to her, she remembers some of the stories. I don't, and I don't know why, but I remember the feeling. And I remember
Hmm.
crying, and I remember my children crying. And so they really did a good job of making us, both giving us the historical lesson, but bringing it to present and making it something that we can move forward with, having, changed our lives, I think.
That's really interesting that they created that space for you guys to share because, as you mentioned, like it's very much a part of not only Japanese culture but Asian culture. I
Yeah.
think to just hey, forget about it, move on. So it's interesting that they brought that and that you guys were able to take advantage of that opportunity. And how was that experience? I mean, was that kind of the first time that you guys actually have, as a family, had that permission to open up like that to each other?
I mean, I think my family's complicated because on the one hand we do have all those cultural values, but then at the same time my mom was kind of this little bit of a rebel, even though there's no outward appearance of that. So we did
Hmm.
have this kind of, I don't know, dichotomy within our family. So I did have open conversations about it, but like I said, the emotional part is the thing that
Mm.
had not really been um, discussed because mom would say it this was something horrible that happened to the Japanese people. It really traumatically affects so many, and then she would always be like, "I'm so fortunate, didn't impact me. Moving
Mm.
on." And like
Yeah.
moving on. So I mean, to see, even if she was not going to say that how emotional it was for her, just to be in the room where others had the experiences, and or they had been able to share with their parents. A lot of the stories were, now some are coming back to me. My parents shared this right before they passed, right? And it was kind of like they wanted to unburden themselves at the end, and there was some of those, that kind of
Oh wow.
sharing.
So moving forward from that, I mean, for your kids to, for you already, it was pretty several, generations removed. For them, it's even more. How did this, I guess, what did they say this did for them, and had did it affect in any way your relationship with them as mother and children?
I know while they were there, those experiences were meaningful. I know they will carry those experiences with them. I don't know that I can tell you exactly how it altered their
Hmm.
lives. They both got Japanese tattoos.
Oh, some
That's
must have done
something.
something.
Does that sound like life changing, meaningful? I mean, they're both still really trying to figure out what it means to be an adult, be a success. I mean, I don't know if it was that experience or just kind of a lot of the things that I value. I know without a doubt that they both want to find careers that have meaning. That's very important for
Hmm.
them. And my values are that what meaning is something that you enjoy doing, but brings positive impact in this world in some way. Like
Hmm.
that's certainly something I've instilled. So I think I'm hoping, right, as their mom, I'm like, this added another layer of I don't know, import guilt, expectation, something. But I don't know that I can say after that they did blank. And
I gotta think at the very least, though, I mean, it's so powerful for you to know where you come from, like not only just from yourself, but those before you. And so to see, what your ancestors had to endure, and yet they thrived beyond, those experiences to get your family to where you are now. So I feel like that's got to at least be inspirational for them to have that kind of foundation now. But you're mentioning you wanted them to have something with meaning, do something with meaning. where did that value come from for you that you wanted to instill in them?
So I mean, I as I said, my family is was a bit unorthodox. The way I was raised too. My mom essentially raised me as a single mom, but I knew my dad well also. You know, I think maybe back then there was less divorce rates. I don't know. People seem like they have a normal
Mm.
intact family. So my family was not normal looking. We'll just leave it at that. It was not normal looking. So we had a little bit of this unorthodox flair in our family, and but both my mom and my dad were scientists, and
Wow,
yes,
I
and
didn't
so I
know
went into
that.
science. Yeah, so I got my degree. I have a
Ah.
bachelor's of science in chemistry, and but they really felt very passionate about the work that they did, although my mom does not express it as overtly as my father did. I mean, he was a very expressive person, and he felt very passionate and thought that science could really do good things in this world. And so I mean, it was kind of
Mm.
modeled for me. It was
Yeah.
pretty innate. I mean, I didn't I had really amazing role models that had careers and professions that they truly loved. And so, I mean, I aspired to have that too. That I thought that's what you had to do. I mean, great that I thought
Yeah.
that, but
So how come you didn't pursue that as your career, or did you?
no, remember when I said like I just do things without figuring things out? So that's how I got into law. It was like I don't know. So I did. I got a bachelor's of science in chemistry, and then I worked as a synthetic organic chemist for a small biotech company in Hawaii for a couple
Wow.
years. Yeah.
What kind of things did you guys do?
I was bachelor's level, obviously. So, I mean, my work was like, you really need to be an expert to be successful in those kinds of fields. So, my work was pretty entry level. But at the time, this was right after the anthrax scares.
Oh wow, yeah.
So, we had DoD grants, or a DoD grant at least, um, to work on late stage treatment for anthrax infection. Because if you remember, they said if you
Mm.
catch it right away, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But if you don't catch it right away, the chances of surviving and serious illness go way up. And
Mm-hmm.
so, my job was to look at so Merck, the big pharmaceutical company Merck. I didn't work for Merck, obviously. They were had huge sources funding, and they were already working on this. So as like a bachelor level, my job was to look at what Merck had already done in this field and then just try to redo it. So I was kind of like following a cookbook, and I would redo
Mm.
it, and then we would put that into like computer programming to think of ways to innovate on what was already done. So I just followed the cookbook at that time because I was entry level. So I did that for let's see, it's a couple, maybe less than 2 years, and then I'll tell you they. So I started entry level position. This was also the time when new tax benefits laws were passed that
Oh, okay.
included the film. That's why we have so many films
Right.
here, right? Because all the film
Yes.
industries get. So it was a film and biotech. It was actually packaged together, film and biotech.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the film one worked and the biotech didn't. But the idea was that biotech
Oh.
was going to get drawn to Hawaii, and then we were going to be like the middle point between the continent and maybe Asia. I don't know. This was
Yeah.
I was 22. I wasn't paying that close attention, but you know,
It makes
that's
sense. Sounds good.
yeah,
Yeah.
sounds good. Okay, but something
Geographically, yeah.
that was my understanding of what was going on. So like maybe like 8 months into it, they scaled us to mainland biotech pay. Maybe 8 months to a year into this. So I don't remember the numbers, but I got like this tremendous raise because now I'm getting paid like I work in San Fran or Boston or
Yeah.
like some big biotech hub. And then I think a few months later they realized, oh no, we can't do that. So they laid a bunch of us off.
Oh my gosh.
So just before I got laid off, I was thinking about what I was going to do for grad school though. And so I had
Um,
started studying for the GRE and thinking about a PhD in chemistry.
Hmm.
But I also kind of realized there's no biotech in Hawaii. So even if I got my PhD, there wasn't that many jobs. So I
Yeah.
started considering studying for the LSAT. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a patent attorney. I don't know if there's patent attorney jobs in Hawaii, but you need a bachelor's of science to become a
Oh,
patent
okay.
attorney. So I was like, oh, I already have that. And that's like unique. So I'll do that. So I just started studying for like GRE and LSATs. And then I got laid off. And then I was like, well, I guess I'll go to law school. And that's what
It's just
happened.
a, a common thought that just passes through.
I guess it's just law school now. So then I went.
Through that experience, though, I mean, did you feel that there was something that you could attach yourself to as far as finding meaning? And yes, it kind of just happened that way to go to law school, but I gotta imagine that you still had that, gut feeling or something of there's going to be meaning in this. It's not just a job or career, right?
Well, I didn't become a patent attorney. Spoiler
Right,
alert. I
right.
am not a patent attorney. I don't make lots of dollars. I'm not sitting in a nice sound system because I am not a patent attorney. I became a public defender. Very different. No, yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly what happened. I took, what are they called? Clinics, which are supposed to be like
Hmm.
real world experiences, right? In law school. And that's
Hmm.
was like quite literally the first time I learned what a public defender was. I don't have attorneys in my family. Our family was not running in any of those spheres. I don't know criminal defense attorneys. I didn't know anything about it.
Right.
So I learned what a public defender was for the first time in law school at like age what 27ish because I'd taken a few years to get to law school. And I was like, yeah, I I, I like what that does. Like that sounds like it's good. And then I did. That was one of the only times I've set my sight on a goal. So like maybe my
Ah,
2L year, law school's 3 years, I said this is really what I want to do. And so becoming a public defender wasn't as serendipitous. I mean, it was at
yeah.
the outset, but I did decide that's what I actually want to do. And then I did set my goal for the remainder of law school to set myself up to be able to become a public defender. I mean, I can say, I talk to college, high school kids about careers, and there's
Hmm.
nothing about being a public defender that makes sense with my innate skills because I'm math and science. I'm not writing
Uh-huh.
and reading, and I know you didn't know me, but this is real, and no one would believe me because I've now just talked for I don't know 35 minutes straight. I was like so shy when I was little. Like
Really?
so shy. Like so shy. I was like the kid that didn't talk. Like I wouldn't I wouldn't use the bathroom all day because I was too scared to like raise my hand.
Wow.
So
Why was
public speak
that?
I don't know, I just have that in me, like people have that. Like when you walk in a room and you're immediately like little sweaty and little red and you're like this is terrifying. Public
That's
speaking it's
interesting.
even to today, public speaking is terrifying.
I guess I can relate because when I was younger, I was very shy too. But I equated that to like, I was a single only child raised by a single mom, and I was kind of like sheltered. I stayed in a little utility closet at her office, and I spent my childhood in there watching a tiny little TV. So like it made sense to me kind of in theory why I was very shy. But you grew up with siblings, and you said
No, I
that
did it.
you're.
I'm an
Oh,
only
I thought you
child.
said. Oh, I
Yeah,
misunderstood. I thought you said your brothers and your sisters. I guess you were talking
my
about the other
cousins.
families.
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
yeah. No,
Oh, okay. Well, then that makes
I
sense
grew
then.
up just like
Yeah.
you. I grew up only
Okay.
child, single mom. After school, I would be under her desk playing with little
Yeah.
test tubes of water to to entertain myself. She'd like hand me a few like science things, and I'd sit, and then people would come in her office, and I'd be under the desk just like shh, just very quiet. And then they'd leave and I'd go back to playing with like little droppers. So
Yeah.
no,
Oh
I
man.
same reason.
So what? So when did it change for you? Or I mean, I know you said you're still, terrified of public speaking and such. But when I remember you in high school, I I remember I was in one class with you at one time, and I just remember you're, I think, behind me or next to me, but the teacher was asking everyone to introduce themselves, like say your name or something like that. And I just remember you just like popping like, "Hi, I'm Minda," and it's just like I was like, "Oh man, she's one of the cool kids," and so that's how, you know, somebody who has that confidence and stuff carries themselves, and that's the only memory I have of you, and it always was just like, oh, she's got it all together.
No, in high school, that was 100% like overcompensation for my insecurities. Like that was
Wow.
fake. It was not genuine. I think when I realized I went through puberty and then I wanted to be have attention from boys, right? So that was high school
Mm-hmm.
or middle school, high school. And then when I wanted that, I didn't know how to deal with like the uncomfortableness. So I overcompensated by being loud and funny and outrageous. So that was
Oh,
high school, but I was still very
wow.
like incredibly uncomfortable inside. So in
Holy
college
smokes.
was the first time I tried to like intentionally without resorting to like humor or being the class clown or being obnoxious. I tried to make concerted efforts to be comfortable or at least face my fears. And so I can distinctly remember raising my hand in at the University of Hawaii in classes, trying to answer in a vulnerable way. And I mean, it's not really vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
but like I was not raising my hand to be silly. I wanted to get the answer
Mm.
right, so that made it vulnerable. And I can always remember like my ears, my face, my neck hot and bright red because it felt
Oh wow.
so unpleasant to be even in this like fake it wasn't a real spotlight, but in my mind there was an
Yeah.
actual spotlight on me. And so I started working on it in college. And by the time I graduated, I could raise my hand without turning bright red. But I remember like that flushed feeling was it, and you're just like now everyone's really looking, right? And I don't remember the last time I got flushed like that from embarrassment, but it used to happen when I was 18, 19, and 20, like
Wow.
constantly.
What was it about that time where you said you decided to challenge yourself to make that change? Was there a specific reason?
I think so. I mean, I think I don't know if you remember this about me in high school, but I had my son. Did you know that? You
Yes.
knew that. Okay, I was like,
I
that was
did.
another. I was like that. I was like, people remember two things about me in high school. I was like loud and obnoxious, and I
You
was one
weren't
of the.
I wouldn't say you're obnoxious. I took it as that you were extremely confident, and that was something that I was impressed by, honestly. Like I took it as confidence. So it's surprising to me knowing what the true story is behind it, but I didn't think you were obnoxious. I just thought you were like one of those like Teflon kind of personalities like, "Ah, this is
Gosh,
who I am. I'm just here to show the world."
the farthest from what was really going on. So, I mean, I had him when I was incredibly young, right before we graduated. And so I was really, really pushing myself to figure out what it meant to be an adult. And I was pretty
Hmm.
serious about being an adult once that happened. And I mean, I wanted to prove everyone wrong. I I've always been, you know, relatively competitive, and I'd put it on myself at that point that I was going to prove folks wrong. And so I did. I mean, I took school very, very seriously as an undergrad. I took, I took everything really seriously. So I think I just started setting goals for myself, and that was certainly one of them.
I see. Well, since you brought it up, I'm wondering if it's okay that I go back to the experience of having your son in senior year of high school, if that's okay. Um, Only because I have the position of being of the many students that just kind of hearsay, like you weren't around anymore, and then it was like, oh, she got pregnant, and I've never talked to you about it, and back then I think it was not as common to
Mm-hmm.
see, especially at Punahou,
Yeah.
you know, young mothers. But what did you go through? I mean, I gotta imagine I mean, your senior year. What was the situation or the experience like for you?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll share a few more personal details, and I feel very comfortable, but I'm gonna make them a little more opaque than you know, I'm not going to go into like gory detail, but
Right,
I'll
right.
share a
Of
few more.
course not.
I had said that like my there's aspects of how I grew up and my family that I felt at least were incredibly unconventional.
Mm-hmm.
And so not only was I in this school where I felt like everybody had just had the looks, the money, the and, you know
Mm-hmm.
everything. So that's a high pressure school, and then I felt very different um, because my family dynamic was different from anybody that I knew. So I had a lot of um, angst, or I mean, I really was dealing with emotionally a ton in high school. I mean,
Mm.
I was not a happy person on the inside at all in any way, shape, or form. I had low self esteem. All the things that you think of like a teenage, especially a teenage girl, was going through.
Mm-hmm.
All those things were going on inside of me. I didn't know who I was. I felt uncomfortable with just everything. And so when I got pregnant with my son, um, I, I, I thought, I think, I mean, I still think that like he saved me from myself. And
Wow.
I mean, I really truly believe that. And it was not a way, I mean, there's many other avenues to get saved. you don't have to, you don't have to do it this way. But I felt like all of that kind of unpleasant feelings melt away. They didn't actually. I obviously had to go ahead and deal with them actually as an adult, but it was like it was something that just quieted all the unhappiness that was inside of me.
Mm.
Um and so I when I think about it now, like that time in my life, it feels like I'm watching like a TV show of somebody else. I don't feel as connected to how just I don't know, you're 17,
Yeah.
just things you feel so strongly. That doesn't affect me now, but there was a lot going on. My family was not pleased, and Punahou did give me their a diploma. I don't know if you knew that. They
See,
told me
I did not know that.
they kind of told me like, "Here's your diploma. We just maybe don't be seen so much," and I wasn't seen so much.
So were
So
you
I,
going?
I
Were you still
left
taking the classes then
I
during your
so I
pregnancy,
left
like from home?
in December, and then I had him in April. And I was taking classes at Kalani High School, which was like, oh my gosh,
Oh,
to show up at Kalani the second semester of your senior year, 5.5 months pregnant. That was horrible
yeah.
too. But so there was like a lot going on, but I felt at peace for the first time, kind of in a long, long time. And again, it's this is not the way to find peace, but it
But
worked out for me. It really did. And then people have asked me after in law school and after, like, hey, can you go talk to teenage moms about how your success story? And I've never done it. I feel like it's not fair because I had so many
mm,
resources, right? Even though my family was like very, very upset at me, I was
mm,
never gonna need to find shelter and food for me and my son because I had that safety net. So I've never done it because I can't tell somebody that has less resources than me how to succeed
yeah.
in the. I mean, I don't want to discredit what I did. It was a lot. I handled emotionally and all that, but like I had my basics always taken care of. So I've
Mm.
never like spoken to anybody on that level because I did have quite a bit. I don't know if that was the
But I gotta
question and the
imagine.
answer.
I No, no. But I
Whatever
gotta
you
imagine
asked.
that it's helpful, even though you may have differing situations from the people you talk to. Just having someone who could at least understand the emotions that they're going through, um, I would think is something that is very powerful to know that they're not alone or, so not to say, hey, go do it, but I'm just saying, give yourself a little credit that it's not just about, oh, you have resources, so you shouldn't have anything to stand on to speak to them about. I think there's more to it than that. And just on the emotional level, because I think they're probably feeling alone and scared. So I think it'd be helpful to see someone like yourself who who came out on the other side, regardless of what, your differences of situations. But I
Y-
understand.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I mean, I do. I give myself credit. It was a lot. I don't know,
Yeah.
but there is also something to be said. And again, I'm not advocating for this, but we kind of are like aside emotionally, no, because I was still emotionally unsure, and financially, I was not prepared. But like physically, we're made to have babies at that age.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I was, you know what I mean? I was like doing it all, and I
Yeah.
look at and it was okay. I just kept doing it all because you have energy and you don't need to sleep when you're 20 and you just go, go, go. So there was something to be said for that.
Yeah. And would you say that, because you're mentioning that during that time you were going through a lot, and it's almost as if the pregnancy helped quiet that, uh, would you say it's because instead of constantly looking at yourself and picking, now you put all of your care into this child because that's, there's no question about it. You got to, like, this is part
Exactly.
of you, right?
No, that's
Yeah.
exactly what happened. And I don't want to pretend like that was it, right? And all the
Hmm.
stuff came back.
Yeah.
And
Everything.
I
Yeah.
had to I had to deal with it like for real a little bit later. But it really put a lot into focus for me really quickly. And I mean, I like I said, I took my undergraduate degree super seriously. I focused on my undergraduate degree because by the time I got to law school, I was like, hold up, I never got to be a kid. I'm going to have a little bit of fun. So I did have a little bit of fun in law school. But
I think everybody does when they're in law school.
add a little bit more.
um, well, you're mentioning that, from law school you got introduced to public defense. So what about it was something that was it that would drew you so much? Because when I think of people going into law, like I'm going to be a lawyer, the first thing as a person who doesn't know anything about that career, I go, oh, they're going to make a lot of money and they're going to be super rich and have the gold toilet and all that kind of stuff. And then when I hear about public defender, I just automatically think, oh, but they don't. From what I understand, they don't have all that money. So what was it about that had to have been something so personal to you to know I want to do this, which I know isn't going to be as glamorous or make me as rich as these are like the patent lawyer, but what was it about it that you learned that drew you so much to it that you committed your life to it?
I mean, I think that I have felt the emotions of being judged and being
Mm,
an outcast and being not what is expected for a variety of reasons. Some of them were real, like when I was the random Punahou kid that got pregnant. Some of them were imagined when I was having these issues in my own head that nobody was able to outwardly see. But I mean, I've certainly
mm,
dealt with those feelings of being judged, being maybe somewhat of an outcast, looked down upon, made mistakes in my life. All of those things I could relate to, and I thought it was when I learned the specifically the mission of the public defender, which is somewhat different from criminal defense attorney, right? I really have thus far in my career no desire to be a criminal defense attorney. I genuinely want to be a public defender and represent those that otherwise would not have representation, but for the public defense system. That resonated with me. I told you that reading and writing aren't my first or second or third loves or fifth. So I was like, well, I could do a little talking in court. That seems like I could do that, even though I'm shy. But by then I was less shy, and so I was like, less reading and writing also sounds like a bonus. Uh, and then I think that I am an extrovert. I mean, so I get recharged by connecting with individuals. Like
that makes sense.
when I'm sitting alone in my own thoughts for too long, I get
Hmm.
drained. I mean,
Yeah.
I know introverts love that, right? They like to sit alone and
Hmm.
stew. I'm like, this is exhausting. I need to like talk to another human. And so, I learned about how that kind of conversational, um, conversational skill or desire is what you do in front of juries. So that appealed to me. So there was quite a bit actually that I think I thought would fit me, even though like my innate academic skills were not in lawyering. And then
Yeah.
I mean the mission has given me great purpose. And like I said, it's been 15 years, 14 years, and I have
Mm-hmm.
not yet had a desire to stop doing public defense. So I was lucky.
For for you, what do you define your mission as a public defense lawyer?
I mean, it's certainly transformed for a number of reasons. Like, I've just gotten older and
Mm,
not wiser, but have more life experiences. And so
right.
I am able to, I think, at this point in my career, have real and meaningful conversations with the vast majority, not all, but the vast majority of my clients. And these are people who have very different lived experiences than I do, have were brought up sometimes, but not always, in tremendous adversity, experienced unthinkable traumas, had poverty in ways that I assume you or I have never experienced,
Mm-hmm.
and have done things that society has, um, and rightfully so. We don't want these things in our society, but has categorized as really bad. And
Mm-hmm.
I have. It is a very, very. I can't think. I'm a lawyer, so we just never say never because that's what we do. We don't say absolutes. But I don't want to say it like, oh, I can think of a specific client. I can't. That doesn't have truly redeemable and human qualities. So that
Mm,
really is what kind of is enjoyable to me right now. And then that sounds a lot like social work, and it is.
mm-hmm.
But and so I wouldn't be a good social worker. I couldn't do that like exhaustively like social workers or counselors or therapists have to do. So I like that I get to do it just as much, and it's kind of like a bonus on top of my lawyering, and then but I don't have to like do it exclusively. I would not be good at that. So right now that's something that's really meaningful, and I say both age and also where I am. I'm in the federal system. It's pretty
Mm-hmm.
different from the state. Things move slower, cases are bigger. um, we have way, way, way less trials, so we're not really like winning and fighting in that context. When
Mm-hmm.
I was a brand new lawyer and a state public defender, trials were like super fun, and you got to like do the lawyerly things. So that excited me about the career at the beginning. But it's changed. But representing people has been at the root of what how this is my career has given me meaning for sure.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that because I think for many who are on the outside, don't understand. We, like you said, we just judge or we label people, and if it's somebody who's in court with a public defender, it's like, ah, guilty, like and the it's you don't look at them as people. Sometimes people just look at them as, let's just get them out of here, out of sight, out of mind. And it feels like, especially in talking with you, in before when we were talking about kind of the system and things and things that you'd like to see changed, um, I really gravitate towards this idea of, let's try to give people resources to do better versus locking them up and forgetting about them, because it doesn't help anyone in the long run. Like, it just, we're humans. We need to be treated as such, right?
It doesn't help. I mean, it doesn't help that individual, and the vast majority of people are going to get out of custody. We're not locking people up forever unless they're committing
Mm-hmm.
like the most serious types of offenses. I mean, we don't have the money or the space to do that if you want to put it on that level. But also, I think morally, we're not locking people up forever for committing property crimes. Like, that's just not, I don't think, where we want to be as a society. So it doesn't help that person when they return to our community. But even
Yeah.
like I just said, most of my clients have stories and trauma and abandonment and things like that. So if you lock somebody up and just kind of don't give them resources, separate them.
Yeah.
This is, you're inflicting this on the next generation. Like most
Mm-hmm.
of them have children, and their mother or father is gone in this cold and sterile, and at the best of circumstances, cold and sterile. The worst of
Mm-hmm.
circumstances, dirty and scary, right?
Yeah.
Place. And if you're lucky enough to go visit your parent, you're either experiencing this like unpleasant, on the scale of unpleasant to terrifying. You're visiting them in that
Yeah.
circumstance. And so, we're just creating more trauma for the next generation who's then going to grow up with inadequate, often, skills and quite frequently repeat the cycle. So, I mean, there's just so many reasons our system needs to be changed. I talk about that kind of stuff not in my work. I feel like when you're in the system, when you're as a public defender, there's only so much you can change from within. I mean, the
True.
change
Yeah.
is small and incremental. I try to bring compassion, and I mean, I tear up in a professional way. I'm not like in court sobbing,
Mm-hmm.
but like
Yeah.
I let my emotions come through, and I try to bring that to my practice. But especially like outside of my job, I certainly try to have conversations with people or where I can advocate for systemic change because that's where it can happen is outside my job. Thank you for the platform. A little
Of
kind of
course. No,
soapbox.
I appreciate you because it's through the conversations that you've had and the people that you've introduced me to that has really opened my eyes to because as a person living here in Hawaii, I kind of don't get to see that. I don't have access to that. And so my opinion is very limited. And it's just off of what kind of like the public opinion is, which is just like, well, I'm not a criminal. I'm not in jail. Like that's that's someone else's problem. But in talking with you, you really humanized it and helped at least bring to light what just perception, the change of perception, the power of that could result in, and being in this state where it's we we all are prided as that we treat each other like family, and
Yeah,
there's plenty more work to do to earn that title or that moniker, right? So yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Do you remember your first trial where you had to stand in front of a jury and because hearing you now talk about like now, oh yeah, it's fun, I enjoy it, but I have to imagine it was terrifying.
Yes. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember my first trial. I think it was my very first trial. So you start out doing obviously less serious hearings, right? You work your way up. So I remember my first judge trial, and or I don't know if it was my very first one or was the first one where I didn't get the result I wanted. He was found guilty of a what they call a lesser included, so it wasn't not guilty. And I remember like it all. I was so like emotionally like I turned it all on myself, and in fact I will tell you this. I took it so hard, and then like I did a little retail therapy. So then I went and bought myself something nice right after, and then I was sharing it with somebody else, and then I realized how inappropriate that was because I had made the whole experience about myself, right? So then, so that helped me. Where yes, standing up in front of a jury is terrifying, and the experience is very difficult. But after I had that kind of what I will label an inappropriate response, I kept I worked on keeping it front of mind that my job is not it's not about me. It's about doing right by somebody else. And then I don't know that it gave me an additional layer of responsibility, but it also made it not about me. So I could kind of put aside all those feelings of self doubt and am I good enough and
Mm-hmm.
do people like me, because it doesn't really matter. Like I need to do right by somebody else. It's kind of like how when oh this is I just had an epiphany when I told you I had all these feelings of self doubt and worthlessness and angst, and then I like got pregnant, and then it suddenly like quieted it. everything for
Mm,
me.
yeah.
It's kind of like that happened again. Like I
Yeah.
went from being like, this is about me and I got to go shopping now to make myself feel better, to like, no, this is about somebody else and I need to do right by them. And then it kind of shut down that part of me that still exists. Um, that that where and I was able to take on, I don't know, like not a different persona and not certainly not a motherly persona, but I was able to put this kind of coat on and be this person's lawyer and represent them. And so I think that helped me, that experience where I truly made it about me, to realizing it's literally not about me. So stop making it about you. But I still yet when I get a guilty verdict, it's like you have that rush of like, it really transports me back to high school where you're like, nobody likes me and these 12 people don't like
Oh.
me. And then you have that. And then I call my family
Oh
and I say,
no.
do you guys even still love me? And I give myself like 5 minutes of making it about me and then I let it go after. But so I think that was my long-winded way of saying, by the time we got to the place where I was in jury trials, of course it was scary. Of course I
Mhm.
was nervous, but I had the right mindset where I recognized this isn't about me. This is not my day in court. It's theirs, and that helped a
That's
lot.
so powerful, and yeah, I'm very much in awe of you to figure that out and to apply it in such a way because um, being sharing similar types of feelings, it's easy to just get in this cycle of turning it within yourself, and it's just this vicious cycle of it going back and around and around. So for you to be able to recognize that and I feel like what it did is not that it distracted you, but it gave you laser focus
Yeah,
of what it really is supposed to be for you. And that's where the fulfillment comes too, because now you know where you're supposed to go, right?
yeah, I think that's right.
So so I think hearing all this explain helps me understand my first question, which is how you know, what drew you to JACL in this work. And you said there are several things. Was there something else that kind of I feel like your life story makes so much sense as to how it's gotten to where you're at now, and the work that you can do for others, and also as an example for your family too. I mean, saying that you just want your children to find meaning in what they do, and I think they can see that what that looks like versus just this ambiguous thing like do something that finds meaning. They get to see it being acted out in your life.
No, I mean, yes, I think that's exactly right. I also got involved when I realized my kids were about to be adults. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
like having another crisis. Like, who am I if not a mom? Because I never had the time and space to figure out what it meant to be an adult without being a mom. So I was like, I must
Yeah.
volunteer in things. So then I did. I volunteered in things and I volunteered in quite a few things. And I was particularly drawn to JACL for one, the reason that we started out with, but also because I started learning so much more about what the organization does, and in particular, our local chapter, which has taken such meaningful and powerful stances on local issues. Native Hawaiian self determination in the 90s, it was marriage equality. There's just been a kind of a vast array of important civil rights issues that the local chapter got into. Selfishly, I'll say this. I also thought, hey, criminal justice reform is an important thing that I
Mm.
like to advocate for and talk about. And as I said, I can't do that within the system. Might JACL be an organization that's willing to think about that? That was something. It did seem to fit with the things that brought meaning to me. So I joined in 2020, and then over the last 4 years, I've learned so much about nonprofits, volunteer work, made connections, learned about civil rights much more broadly than my field of focus, and
Mm-hmm.
and, and I really, really, truly value that the work JACL does and the exposure it's brought to me. So I went into it kind of, on a whim. It made sense. I was looking for things to volunteer to, but when it really stuck and fit with so many things in my life, that was, I really am into it and committed right now. So I like JACL a lot, and I'm thankful for the organization.
What do you feel as far as for some people they'll say, well, why try? Because the mountain is too big to overcome. Like there's just so many things wrong with our state, or you're never going to make change. But you're showing that you don't subscribe to that feeling. What is it that makes you have that hope, or that belief that things can change and that you are able to make differences? And that's why, I mean, you're doing the work that you're doing, obviously. But where does that come from?
I mean, I get that feeling because there's like so many things that need changing, and I
Mm-hmm.
realize I can't focus on all of them. And I have, like, if there's an issue I know about that I'm not caring about, I feel guilty, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
know, I just can't do it. So I get that feeling. I just let it go because I can't. Um, and there's so many things that need changing. But I mean, I think that I don't know. Like, I'm a relatively optimistic person, and I've I like, there's this perception that the next generation is so much worse than us because they don't. I certainly, like, was working in school doing things. I worked myself to the bone, and I did self care was not a thing. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
there was no Sephora for me to have sunscreen and skin, like, just, so we see that as like the gold standard, and then we see what a lot of people see what the next generation is doing and say, like, they're entitled and they're spoiled and they don't. But I see it as like, it's they're shifting the paradigm. Like, you can do good
Mm.
things and take care of yourself. I think what they're doing is like pretty remarkable, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
never my mindset is always like, change is good, progress is good. I'm never going to say, well, that's not the way I did it. Like, regardless, I'm always going to be like, oh, maybe that, and I don't know where that comes from, but I truly subscribe to, like, change and progress is good. And then when you start having that perception, I think you see change and progress where other people
Mm.
see demise and failure. I mean, I can
Yeah.
look at the last 9 years, 8 years of practice in federal court, and I think I see progress, even though it's progress in the direction that I believe progress should go. It's incremental and it's small, but I see it. And so I don't see it as not hopeful. I see constant change. I mean, there's all these terms that we didn't know when, like, our generation was well, for me, parenting, there's like
Mm-hmm.
baby led weaning. I learned what that is. And I was like, well, when I'm a grandparent, if that's what my kid wants to do, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to say that's not how I did it. Right. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. I just like change, progress, learning. So I think I see the world as that's what's happening.
I love that. And hearing you say that, it's like, oh, that makes so much more sense to me, because when I hear about the people complaining about this generation and back in my day, I was like, well, if I think about it, back in my day, I was miserable. I was like, had anxiety and I felt alone. Like, it's terrible. And working hard wasn't fun. It made me feel like I questioned, like, what is my purpose in life? Like, that's not a great place to be. So for them to find different ways to take away that burden, that hurt, it's like, that's awesome to me. So I'm with you on that. If you wanna run for something, I'll support you.
I don't want to run for anything. You can just support me.
Well, I will support you in that. I'm a huge fan of yours. I was before this, but even like 10 times more now,
Stop.
knowing your story. And I'm so grateful that you were willing to share and be vulnerable. And I, I, I'm hoping that more people here in Hawaii will subscribe to the way that you've described thinking, because I think that's what's going to help make us heal and improve and get better. And earn that moniker of we are the Aloha State. So I'm really grateful that you jumped on, and uh, I guess the way I could support you is to give you a platform to promote JACL and how we can help you improve and grow that and continue your mission there. So, what do you guys have coming up, and how can people get involved? How can people support what JACL is doing?
Yes, I would love to say that. So, we do have a website, but it is sorely outdated, and we are working on it. So, I don't want to. I mean, you can look at jaclhonolulu.org, and in 2024, it will be a lot better. So that's one thing we're working on.
Ooh, exciting! Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where it is. There's, I think the best way to find out more information is to email directly because I have gotten in the last year and a half a good method for keeping up with emails. So jaclhon@gmail.com. Yeah. So that's the best way to get
Okay.
in touch with us if you want. I can send you a link for membership. Membership just means that obviously you'll pay membership dues. You'll get emails from us with events that are coming up, opportunities to volunteer if you want. If anybody wants to be on the board, we are an all volunteer board, and we are 13 of us right now that take on tremendous amount of work outside of our jobs and our lives. So we're always looking for people that want to get more involved beyond just membership. We just launched in 2024 a fellowship program where we have four amazing high school juniors that we are mentoring directly. They come from
Oh,
four
cool.
different schools. Yeah, so we have one from Punahou High School, one from Mid Pacific, one from Pacific Buddhist Academy, and one from Maui High School. Really, really
Wow.
excited. So we're doing workshops with them to teach them various aspects about grassroots organizing, nonprofits, social activism, and then they are going to create a little mini proposal at the middle after we do our workshops starting this February, a mini proposal and request funding, and we're going to fund a project that is in line with civil rights and social activism of our mission, and we're going to help them fulfill that. So we have fundraisers for that project, and we're always looking for community leaders to come and talk to them for that. We have the Day of Remembrance. I didn't know I was going to do this, so this is like I'm just pulling this out of my head right now.
No,
We have the
this is a
Day
lot
of
of stuff,
I know, sorry. Day of
but that's good.
Remembrance
That means you
event.
guys are doing a lot.
Day of Remembrance is February. I think it's the Sunday. I can't remember if it's the 18th or the 19th. Um, and we're doing it in conjunction with the Betsuin, the Hongwanji Betsuin, and they have actually taken the lead. In the past, JACL has, but they've taken the lead on this year's event, and it is tremendous. And I'm so excited. They're doing a morning service that's free, and then an evening fundraiser featuring George Takei, who's coming down,
Oh,
and
cool.
yeah, doing a little talk and like poo-poos and refreshments, some entertainment. The proceeds are going to be donated to nonprofits, and the mission focus specific is the LGBTQIA community, and so
Mm.
we'll have flyers on our website possibly, but I have emails. So if you're on the
Yeah.
email list, the emails are going
Let's
out
just email
tomorrow.
you.
Yeah, just email me. I have a newsletter going out tomorrow to remind folks to sign up for that. And I mean, we're just going to keep doing stuff, so it's exciting. That's some of
Man, you
it.
guys are awesome. That's really great. I'll throw all of those links and info into the show description and stuff so people can connect with you. And yeah, again, cannot thank you enough, Minda. It's you're an inspiration, but just also a really great person. And I'm so glad that I know you, and I'm so glad I got to know you even more. And I'm so glad that you are heading all of these things in positions that you are able to impact our state in in so many different ways. So thank you, and give yourself a pat on the back because you deserve it.
Thank you. I will. I'll just graciously accept. I can't. I can't do it. That's too much. But thank you.